I was 17 when the lock fought me like it knew the truth before I did. The deadbolt turned hard, then gave with a throat-clearing click, and I stepped into a house that had been emptied with precision. The sofa outlines on the carpet. Pale rectangles where picture frames had hung. A single note on the counter, written in my mother's neat, accountant handwriting. You'll figure it out. The aftersound in my head was a door slamming from far away. I stood there long enough for the air to settle around me and told myself this was a prank, a surprise, the kind of cruel joke families pull in sitcoms before jumping out shouting gotcha. But the refrigerator was unplugged and warm. The closet's yawning with nothing but wire hangers. The only thing left was the note and the smell of lemon cleaner like someone had wiped even our arguments away. I called my mom. Straight to voicemail. My dad. Straight to voicemail. My brother Daniel, who was 15 then and practiced indifference like a religion. The call failed. When the landlord told me a week later that the lease had been canceled and I had 7 days to vacate, I asked him twice to repeat it just to watch his face when he said the words. He couldn't meet my eyes. Tough break, kid. He said, like my life was a tire that had simply given out on the freeway. What I didn't say was that I had seen this future in smaller shapes. At 13, I baked my mother a birthday cake, whisking until my arm burned. She ate one bite, wrinkled her nose, and called it clumpy. At 15, I tutored Daniel through finals. He called me a know-it-all and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the houseplant. At 16, I handed my entire paycheck to my father to cover the gas bill. Months later, when I asked about it, he told me I was useless. I was always useful, just never loved. The first nights were couches and excuses. The fourth night, when my last maybes ran out, I folded myself into the back of a storage unit I'd rented with the money I should have saved. Thin metal ribs of the walls, the breath of other people's boxes, the door that rattled with every truck that passed on the street outside. I learned the quiet hours at the YMCA, slipped into shower when no one looked up, then ate peanut butter from a plastic spoon while my reflection in the library screen stared back at me, puffy-eyed and determined. You'll figure it out, the note had said. So I did. The diner saved me by not caring who I was. Night shift, cash in hand until I could scrape together an ID, the manager, a woman with mascara and a spine of steel, who let me nap in the break room once when my hands shook too hard to carry coffee. A regular offered me a temp job clearing file rooms at a firm that kept its skeletons in bankers' boxes. I was quiet, early, and relentless. The boxes gave way to spreadsheets, the spreadsheets to deliverables with my name on them, the deliverables to retainers. By 22, I freelanced full-time. By 25, I'd filed an LLC with a borrowed laptop on a folding table. By 27, I had contractors and an office lease that I read 3 times before signing. At 29, my bank app stuttered over the comma into 7 figures. I sat on the floor with my back to the couch I had bought with no one else's permission and cried. Not pretty, not cathartic. Just a body finally letting go. They never called. Not once. Sometimes I searched their names like pressing on a bruise. Daniel appeared in a suggested friends list, smiling beside a woman whose eyes said she counted laundry and hours and sacrifices. I wondered if he told her about me. I wondered if I existed in a story where I had run away, or simply not at all. I'd go to therapy now. Melissa sits with a notepad she doesn't use and helps me name things I swallowed whole. She says the body keeps score and mind plays to win. I keep a list of names in my phone. The manager, the librarian who looked away when I stayed too long, the security guard who pretended not to see me brush my teeth in the bathroom. These are the people who saved me when they didn't have to. This, I tell myself, is what love looks like when it's real. The podcast happened by accident. A friend hosted a series about estrangement, and after 3 false starts and 1 panic attack, I told the story into a microphone with a foam hat. 4 days later, it was everywhere. My inbox filled with thank you for saying it out loud. With I thought it was only me, with quiet, trembling relief. And then the subject line, you're still our daughter. My mother's email was efficient, a paragraph in which she mentioned hearing my side, as if my life were a debate with time limits. Maybe we could talk, she wrote, and attached photographs. Me gummed in baby pink, us at a beach with sunscreen stripes like war paint, Daniel and I building a lopsided snowman. Happy moments bleached of context. My brother emailed too. We miss you. Can we fix this? I stared at the screen until the words crawled. Melissa told me to take a week before deciding anything. You get to decide what your nervous system can afford, she said. There is no prize for sprinting toward pain. So I waited and didn't sleep and read the emails like they might change if I squinted. After 10 days, I wrote to Daniel first. It's been 12 years. What changed? He replied in under an hour. The podcast, he said. He was 15 then and had no power. He checked for me online sometimes and felt proud of my success. I asked the question that sat in my mouth like a coin. If you were so concerned, why wait until the world was watching? His answer took longer. He wrote about money being tight, about our parents' failed business, about his pregnant wife and medical bills. The bottom fell out of my stomach. There it was. I didn't respond. My mother sent more photos and the sentence we made mistakes. We want to make amends. In our next session, Melissa asked me what closure meant to me. Peace, punishment, a door bolted shut or opened carefully on its hinges. You owe them nothing, she said, but you may owe yourself clarity. I agreed to meet Daniel. Chicago, neutral ground, a coffee shop with low ceilings and enough noise to hide under. He looked like an older, tired version of the boy who used to flinch at my footsteps in the hall. We talked about weather and roads because we didn't have the language for blood. Eventually, his voice cracked. Ava, I'm sorry. I didn't know they were leaving you. I was a kid. I was scared. Why me? I asked. Why was I the one left behind? He stared at his coffee. They always said you were strong. Independent. That you'd be fine. They told me you had a plan. A friend's family. That you wanted it. I told him about the storage unit and the YMCA and the spoons of peanut butter. He looked like he might be sick. When we stood, he hugged me. I let my arms hang like weights. That night my mother called from a number I hadn't provided. Her voice had the rasp of someone who has learned to cry strategically. She told me she had always known I would succeed, that this proved she'd been right about me. When she paused for breath, I asked, why me? She didn't hesitate. We were in debt, Ava. We couldn't feed 3 mouths. You're smart. We figured social services would place you with a better family. We thought we were doing you a favor. I hung up, blocked the number, threw my phone into a pillow, and let the scream tear something soft inside me. The next morning, my father wrote for the first time in 12 years about medical bills, failed ventures, my sister-in-law's surgery, their eviction. At the end, he asked for help. Not one question about the girl in the storage unit. Melissa picked up on a Sunday. We talked about boundaries like they were walls I could pour, reinforced with steel. Forgiveness is not a visa, she said. No one is entitled to entry. On Monday, I emailed Daniel. I'm open to knowing you and your family with boundaries. No money. No loans. No financial support. No contact with our parents until they take full responsibility. His reply came hot. I'm disappointed, Ava. Family helps family. You're being selfish with your success. I booked a ticket to Bali because distance is a boundary the body can understand. He left a voicemail apologizing later. We talked. He sounded different. Said he'd started therapy. Mentioned our parents visiting him that weekend and asked if I would meet them. I said no. He pushed. I went quiet. He backed off. Then there was a knock downstairs at my building and a couple who wouldn't give names. The doorman called. I said no. My father left a voicemail about me being childish. The next morning, fists on my door. Ava, please, my mother said through wood. We just want to talk. I sat on the floor with my back against the frame, shaking like a trapped animal. After they left, I called building security, then Melissa, who brought a sandwich and sat cross-legged on my rug, reminding me that harassment is not reconciliation. Daniel's email called me cruel. His wife needed surgery. Couldn't I help? I didn't answer. I packed a bag for Portland to see Rachel, the friend who once handed me her couch like a lifeline. Before I left, the doorman called, a woman downstairs with chest pains, asking for me by name. My mother. I told him to call an ambulance, then stood in the lobby later feeling like the world's worst daughter as the doorman told me she'd been taken to Memorial. At the airport, Daniel called to say my mother was in surgery, and it was my fault. I hung up and called Melissa, who said, guilt is their currency. You don't have to accept it. Rachel poured me wine and fury in equal measure. By Sunday night, my father emailed that my mother was stable and asking for me. The card on the flowers they left at my door read, please call us. We're at the Holiday Inn. I threw the bouquet away and blocked another number after receiving a hospital photo of my mother with a message about regret. Then a knock I didn't expect, a tired woman with a sleeping toddler. I'm Rachel, she said softly. Daniel's wife. She set the child on my couch and folded into a chair at my kitchen table. I only learned about you 3 years ago. He told me you ran away. Your podcast. It made everything tilt. She showed me Facebook posts. My mother's public prayers for her troubled daughter, my father's accusations that I'd stolen from them before disappearing. Photos of flyers they supposedly put up at shelters. All dated long after the note on the counter. I'm horrified, she said. I told Daniel to reach out. I didn't know they'd ask for money. I'm sorry. She looked me in the eye. They're desperate because their lies are unraveling. I believed her. I also believed the purpled fingerprints on her arm when she tried to hide them the next day at lunch with my lawyer Marcus. He introduced himself, and Daniel flinched like the word attorney was a slap. We listened as the story tumbled out. My parents living off Daniel for years, co-signing his mortgage, holding a key, a password, his throat. When Rachel confronted them about me, my father grabbed her. Daniel kicked them out. Now they called, showed up, threatened. Marcus took notes and names. Change your locks, he said. Your bank accounts. Your passwords. Everything. Today. The break-in happened fast. A trashed living room. Lily's baby photos gone. A note. Family matters should stay in the family. The officer who took the report looked skeptical until Rachel showed him her bruised arm and the text Daniel received minutes later. "We're watching you." "Come to my place," I said, because my building had cameras and a doorman who had already learned our names like a mantra. Let them in, not them. We ate takeout, stunned into gratitude. Lily built a fort between my coffee table and the couch with blankets patterned like clouds. I learned the sound of Daniel's typing through a closed door and the way Rachel hummed when she folded laundry. It felt like the family version of a burn unit. Quiet, vigilant, not yet healing but refusing to die. Marcus filed for emergency restraining orders. He called a detective who took the case seriously. Security footage at a gas station caught our parents' car near Daniel's house during the hours of the break-in. That night, a brick shattered Daniel's car window in my garage. I filed the report with shaking hands and pretended my jaw wasn't tight when Lily asked why the car was cracked. Sunday night, we practiced our courtroom voices at my kitchen table. What to say without sounding like we'd rehearsed our pain. How to describe escalation in a way a judge could feel in his bones. My phone pinged. Subject: last opportunity. If you go to court tomorrow, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Marcus added it to a folder with a name that sounded like a promise. At court, my parents looked smaller, like the lighting had changed in their scene. My mother lifted a hand. My father caught her wrist. We sat on opposite benches, breathing the same stale air. When the judge called our case, Marcus presented the story like a map. Break-in, threats, stalking, the brick, the email. The judge listened with that particular stillness that means someone is taking you seriously. My parents approached without counsel. My father denied everything, said we were exaggerating, that they were just trying to reconnect. When the judge asked if he had abandoned me at 17, he tried to thread moral equivalence through a needle that was in fact a spear. "We did what we thought was best," he said, and the judge's face darkened like a storm rolling in across water. The orders were granted. 3 years. No contact. No third-party messages. No approach to home or work. Violate and be arrested. My mother said my name once, soft as prayer. I kept walking, each step taking weight off a spine that had learned to carry too much. On the courthouse steps, Marcus shook our hands. Daniel hugged me and said, "I'm sorry," in a voice that understood the word had a cost. My phone buzzed. A photograph of Lily playing in a backyard I recognized, joy oblivious to the camera and the hedges. 4 words. This isn't over yet. We went home in a convoy of fear and resolve. Police took statements, promised patrols, tried to trace the number. That night we took turns keeping watch. At 2 a.m., my father's Buick idled across the street, circling once, twice, 3 times, then settling like a threat that pretends to be legal. I photographed it through the blinds. Marcus told me it wasn't technically a violation. The law asks for lines that monsters know how to step up to but not over. The next afternoon, Melissa asked me what I wanted from my parents. Not what I feared or refused, but what I wanted. I made a list on a napkin: to live without fear, to know Daniel and Rachel and Lily, to stop being responsible for other people's sins, to be free of the past. Reconciliation wasn't there. Forgiveness wasn't there. Understanding wasn't there. Freedom was. So I emailed my parents. Tomorrow. Noon. The coffee shop on 8th. Just me. No police. No lawyers. After that, you leave us alone forever. It was reckless and perfect. My father replied in minutes, "We'll be there." I dressed like armor. Dark jeans, clean lines, a shirt that felt like a decision. I sat in the back corner where I could see arrivals and exits and my own hands. They came on time. My mother moved like someone in a museum, careful not to touch anything. We stared at one another across a small table and too much history. "I didn't come to reconcile," I said. "I didn't come to give you money or hear your excuses. I came to make sure you understand the truth. It's over. You lost. You lost me when you left. You've lost Daniel now. You've lost any right to our lives. If you keep stalking us, threatening us, trying to wedge yourselves back in, I will destroy your myth. Every email, every text, every photo, your church, your friends, your jobs. I'll show them who you are." My father bristled. "You're ungrateful. Difficult. You turned your brother against." "Against what?" I asked. "Against being robbed of his adulthood by 2 people who mistake control for love?" My mother cried like she wanted the room to applaud her pain. "We don't want to die alone," she whispered. "You should have thought of that when you abandoned your 17-year-old daughter and called it a favor," I said. I stood. "This is your final warning. Respect the order. Respect my life. Or I will teach you what consequences feel like." "Do you hate us that much?" my mother called after me. I turned. "I don't hate you," I said, surprised at how true it felt. "I feel nothing for you. You're strangers. That's your loss." Outside, the air tasted like new metal. I called Daniel, told him everything. He was angry I'd gone alone, worried they'd retaliate, then quiet with relief that someone had finally spoken to them in the language they understood. Boundary, consequence, no. For a week there was nothing. Then 2. The detective confirmed they'd driven back across state lines. I went back to work and learned how to breathe without listening for a key in the lock. Daniel and Rachel moved closer, changed everything that could be changed, and discovered that Sunday dinners could be an altar you build yourselves. Lily in a princess dress demanding we sing happy birthday to a plastic unicorn while Daniel burned the garlic bread and Rachel laughed until she cried. 6 months later, a letter arrived through Marcus with a careful return route, so my address stayed mine. My mother's handwriting again, smaller this time. No excuses. Admission. Therapy. Respect for the order. A hope that one day I might hear a proper apology. Daniel got the same letter. We sat at my table, read them twice, and did not decide anything. Sometimes no is a full sentence. Sometimes maybe is a long road with good signage. I kept the letter in a drawer with warranties and passports and the note that started it all. Some nights I take them out and hold one in each hand to feel the weight of how a person can be two things at once. The hand that pushed you into the dark and the letter that says I see it now. At Lily's 4th birthday, she ran loops around my living room while streamers sagged and the cake leaned and Rachel's camera captured a blur of joy. Daniel grilled on my tiny balcony like he'd been practicing for this his whole life. Friends came and went with noisy love. I stood in the kitchen and watched my apartment hold us all. Once, 12 years ago, there was an empty house and a sentence that sounded like a curse. You'll figure it out. I did. Not the way they meant. Not by learning how to need less. By learning how to choose more. I still wake sometimes at 3 a.m. with my heart sprinting, the past reaching through walls. I still flinch when an unknown number calls. I still sit on Melissa's couch and practice sentences like I don't owe you access and my safety matters. Healing is not a finish line. It is breakfast and locks and backups and laughter layered like armor. It is Lily's hand sticky in mine. It is Rachel's tired smile across a sink full of plates. It is Daniel's apology said again when no one asked him to say it. It is the space I keep between myself and two people who chose absence and found they couldn't afford the price. On good days, the quiet in my home sounds like a blessing instead of a warning. On the best days, it's loud music and cartoons and a small voice demanding another slice of cake. Family, I've learned, is not a blood contract. It's a practice. It's who shows up, who holds you, who stops asking you to be small so they can feel big. They left a note and a void. I built a life and a door that locks from the inside. And when people ask if I'll ever forgive them, I tell them the only truth I have: forgiveness is not necessary for freedom. I am already free. I kept the letter in the drawer and kept living. That was the point, Melissa said. Not to win, not to be right, but to live. The next months were a quiet practice. Work, which had once been my oxygen mask, settled back into simply being my job. Sunday dinners. Therapy. The occasional bad dream that left me on the kitchen floor with a glass of water and my cheek pressed to the cool tile. For a while, silence held. Then one morning my assistant poked her head into my office with a face that made my spine go cold. You probably need to see this, she said and turned her laptop toward me. It was a post in a neighborhood community group 2 states over, my parent city. A warning about influencers who profit off false abuse narratives. Grainy screenshots of me on the podcast. A caption that never said my name but said everything else. In the comments, someone uploaded a photo of a courthouse door, our courthouse, time-stamped the day of our hearing. Beneath it, pray for the families being torn apart by hateful daughters. I read it twice, 3 times, the room tightening like a fist. They hadn't contacted me directly, but the message slid through the loophole of technicality. Not a violation, not addressed to me, yet a flare shot into the sky above our lives. I forwarded everything to Marcus. He called back before the chime faded. It's intimidation, he said. We treat it like that. Keep your head down. Document. I'll handle the rest. We turned our Sunday dinner into a strategy session. Daniel's jaw worked as he scrolled. They just keep making new angles to be the victim, he said. Rachel ran a thumb over the faint, old yellow of the bruise that had finally faded from her arm months back. Lily sat on the floor spreading stickers that said things like "great job" onto a stuffed giraffe with no sense of irony. I tried to locate that old panic, rising tide in my chest, the urge to flee, but found only anger. Clean, cold, almost clarifying. If they want court, I said, then we'll go to court. Marcus filed a civil complaint that week. Defamation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The DA, who had started to recognize our names and the pattern that trailed behind them, reached out about the break-in, the threats, the gas station footage. The case that had loitered at the bottom of his pile, the kind that looks like a family matter until you connect the dots with a heavy marker, moved up. What do you want from this? Melissa asked, leaning back as light shifted across her office rug. Not revenge, I said, and surprised myself by how easily the word fell. Accountability. A record. Something that says, this happened. It mattered. And then, to not think about them again. Even if you win, she said gently, your body might still remember for a while. I know, I said. But maybe it will remember the parts where I spoke. Depositions are supposed to be dry. That's what Marcus promised. He even smiled a little when he said it, like he wanted me to borrow his easy. But there is something about being in a room with fluorescent lights and your parents' lawyer. Yes, they had one now, and a court reporter typing every sound you make, that turns your mouth to cotton. We started with basics. My name, my company, my timeline. Marcus had prepared a binder the color of stormwater, tabs neat, evidence labeled like an exhibit hall. My parents' attorney, a man whose tie knot felt too tight for his neck, leaned back, pen touching his lip in feigned thought. You've done well for yourself, he said. Would you say, extremely well? I've worked very hard, I said. So financially, he persisted, you don't need anything. I looked at Marcus. He gave me a tiny, closed-lip nod. Answer what's asked. Nothing extra. I have what I need, I said. He smiled like he'd won a point. And your podcast? How much did you earn from that appearance? Nothing, I said. They don't pay guests. But it brought you business? I didn't do it for business. You did it for attention. I did it to tell the truth. That truth involves painting your parents as monsters. My truth is that they abandoned me at 17 with a note that said, you'll figure it out. That they broke into my brother's house. That they threatened us. He shrugged. We'll let the court decide what constitutes a threat. I could feel the court reporter watching me without looking up, taking down my breath. I thought about the storage unit, the peanut butter, the way the diner's neon used to glow on my exhausted hands, and then I let those memories sharpen my voice. We're here so the court can do exactly that. When it was my parents' turn, they refused to answer questions about the break-in, citing the criminal case. Their attorney ushered them through rehearsed lines about regret and misunderstanding. My father spoke like he was giving a presentation at work. My mother dabbed at eyes that had learned this choreography. When they were asked about the note, though, something flickered. We left her a letter because we knew she was capable, my father said. She was always independent. Strong-willed. And the exact words? Marcus asked, voice smooth. Read them for the record. My father glanced at my mother, who looked down at her hands. We don't remember the exact wording, he said. It said, you'll figure it out, I said. My voice sounded like someone else's for a second. I will never forget the exact wording. The court reporter typed that too. The criminal charges moved slowly, the way boulders do. There were continuances, excuses, paperwork that vanished and then reappeared with stapled corners, an officer who retired midway through and had to be found for testimony. In the meantime, my parents' side experimented with new versions of the truth. A letter to their pastor's newsletter about prodigal children and undeserved suffering. A post by a family friend about how social media fame poisons daughters. They were careful. They spoke in parables. The DA collected them anyway. On the morning of the hearing on our civil case's injunction narrow, just about stopping the online smears while the full case crawled on, I found myself smoothing the edge of my skirt on a wooden bench with Daniel beside me. He stretched his fingers until they trembled and then let them go. I keep thinking about the time Dad took me to get my first bank account, he said softly, staring at his knuckles. He told me it was about responsibility. And then he never took his name off. I remembered my own lessons. Cake, clumpy, money, gone. Usefulness as a leash. You're here, I said. That counts. We walked into the courtroom with Rachel on my other side like flanking was a strategy we'd agreed upon. The judge looked tired in the way fairness makes you. Marcus spoke first, clean and unhurried. He laid their posts beside our fear. He talked about edges. How abusers learn to press against the tape line, how no contact means not only expulsions of direct messages, but the drums they beat around your perimeter until your throat vibrates with dread. My parents' attorney called the posts lamentations. He used the word persecution. He emphasized their age as if birthdays were a legal defense. When the judge ruled, his voice was soft and sure. You will stop talking about your daughter and her family, he said, looking right at my parents. You will remove the posts. You will not repost, reframe, or republish under alternate accounts. You will not encourage others to carry your messages for you. If you do, you will be in violation of this court's order, and I will find you in contempt. He paused. You don't have to agree with their boundaries. You do have to obey them. Afterward, on the steps, my mother made one last attempt. Ava, she said, leaning toward me like proximity could reorient gravity. We're getting help. Good, I said. Help is good. You don't have to hate us, she whispered. I don't, I said. That's not the gift you think it is. She flinched as if I'd struck her. For a second, I saw something raw. Not regret shaped for an audience, but a woman who had built her sense of self from other people's deference and found there was none left for her. Then my father took her elbow and steered her away, and the moment sealed over. The criminal hearing finally came in late autumn, when the trees along the courthouse lawn were intent on being seen. The charge was burglary for the break-in and a separate count for violating the restraining order with the photo of Lily. The prosecutor warned us that first-time offenders often walked with probation. We're aiming for accountability, he said, not promising anything he couldn't. I didn't want prison. I wanted a record in the world that said, This line exists, and when you cross it, someone other than me will say so. Testifying felt like walking barefoot across a floor where you'd broken glass a week ago and vacuumed 3 times since, confident you'd gotten every shard, until you find the piece you missed. The prosecutor asked me to describe the night, the photo, the way fear turns a familiar room into a stage set, the same furniture, different meaning. He asked me to tell the judge about Lily. I did, and my voice cracked, and for once I didn't apologize for that. Daniel took the stand and talked about passwords and keys and a boyhood drowned in be the man of the house speeches that were simply rehearsals for future control. Rachel spoke last, quiet and steady, about Lily's nightmares after the photo, about how a 3-year-old learns the language of safe faster than anyone should. When it was my parents' turn, their lawyer tried to make their actions sound like missteps on a long, grief-stricken pilgrimage. They're just trying to see their family, he said, and my mother squeezed my father's hand like they were a portrait of endurance. The judge found them guilty on the restraining order violation and guilty of criminal trespass, a lesser-included offense on the burglary. Probation, mandated counseling, community service, a no-contact order now backed by criminal teeth, and a small, suspended jail term that would become real if they so much as orbited us. Outside, the air bit with the first hint of winter. We didn't celebrate. We didn't cry. We stood on the steps and breathed. You did it, Rachel said, her hand warm on my shoulder. We did it, I corrected. I thought of every person who had sat with me when the dark felt crowded. Melissa, the manager with mascara and a spine, the librarian who had pretended not to see. We all did. Life, stubborn thing that it is, insisted on moving forward. The civil suit went quiet again, a submarine humming under the surface. The criminal probation slid into its routines, check-ins, reports, and my parents' profiles went blank for the first time in years. It is a particular strangeness to be granted the thing you begged for and find it strange. The silence I had once craved now felt like a new language. I had to learn how to speak without looking over my shoulder for context. Sometimes the nervous system misses the chaos it knows, Melissa said. Even if peace is what you wanted. So how do I learn peace? I asked. Practice, she said. Boring, repetitive, soothing practice. I practiced by making breakfast. By running the same route through the park at the same time. By letting my phone stay face down on the table without my heart rising to my throat at every vibration. By building something I could touch. A small fund, nothing splashy, to help kids in the city who aged out of foster care with the first last month's rent. I named it quietly, after the diner manager who once pretended my shaking hands meant the coffee had been overbrewed. When we launched the fund, I stood in a community center with bad acoustics and told a room full of people I would have never met at 17 that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is pay someone's security deposit. A boy with a hoodie pulled tight asked me later how long it took to stop being angry. I haven't figured that out, I said honestly. But I have figured out how to do things even while I'm angry. Lily started preschool and learned the names of the months like they were poetry. She brought home a construction paper family tree assignment and looked at me with a seriousness that made something in my chest ache. Can I put you on mine? She asked, pressing a glue stick into my hand as if the question had already answered itself. We printed a small photo of the two of us with ice cream dripping down our wrists and placed it right where a person would notice it first. On the anniversary of the note on the empty counter, I took both pieces of paper out of the drawer, the first note and the letter about therapy, and laid them side by side like crime scene evidence and apology next to it. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. And finally, okay with being tired. Healing, I learned, doesn't always feel like strength. Sometimes it feels like sitting with your breath as it comes and not making yourself be brave. The civil case settled the following spring. Non-disparagement in both directions. Removal of posts. A written apology, not for us to keep in a drawer, but for the court file. A monetary component we donated in full to the fund. My parents' attorney called Marcus with a voice like someone who'd lost at a game he'd thought he could rig. Marcus sent me a screenshot of the signed pages and a single line. It's done. People expect victory to taste like champagne. Often it tastes like water you didn't know you'd been thirsting for. We didn't tell Lily the details. She was 4. What she needed to know was this. Grown-ups are responsible for their choices. Love does not look like fear. You can say no and the world will not break. The wrong parts of it might crack, and that cracking is sometimes the first truth. After the settlement, my mother sent 2 more letters through Marcus. The first was a photocopy of a counseling attendance sheet with her signature. The second was 3 paragraphs of something close to a real apology. No justifications. No, but you have to understand. She wrote, I am learning the difference between consequences and cruelty. We made you carry ours. That was wrong. I read it once. I put it away. I did not write back. I told Melissa and we sat in the quiet of her office for a long time. You can be proud of the woman you are without inviting them to meet her, she said. I'm proud, I said and felt it land somewhere deeper than my mouth. A year to the day after the restraining order hearing, we threw a dinner that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with taste. Daniel insisted on making pasta from scratch. Rachel made a salad with too many ingredients and all the right crunch. I set the table with the real plates, the ones I once saved for anyone who might come and then learned were meant for us. Halfway through the meal, Lily climbed onto my chair and whispered, "Tell me the story of the note again," like it was a bedtime tale with a different ending every time. I told it the way I tell it now. Once, when I was 17, two people gave me a sentence that they meant as a door closing, and I turned it into a window. I climbed out. I fell a little. It hurt. But I landed, and I ran, and I found other doors, and now I have keys. "What about the bad guys?" she asked, because 4-year-olds know stories require them. "They're just people," I said, and felt how true that was now. People who made choices, and then different choices. The important part is our choice. She nodded like I'd given the correct answer on a test only she knew about, then slipped off my lap and ran to show Daniel a sticker she'd put on the cat. He pretended to be scandalized. Rachel and I laughed until we wheezed. After dinner, when the kitchen was down to the thick hush that follows warmth, Daniel and I stood side by side rinsing plates. "Do you ever think about what if?" he asked, wrist deep in suds. "All the time," I said. "And then I look at right now." He nodded, the line of his mouth less haunted than it had been a year ago. "Thank you," he said. "For all of it. For not giving up on me, even when you could have." "I did give up on you," I said gently. "For a while. It was the right thing then. And then you showed up. That's on you." He blinked hard and bumped my shoulder with his. "Fine. We can both be right." We stood there for a long minute, two kids who had learned to breathe past the smoke, now filling our lungs with air that didn't burn. Sometimes I still see my mother in a crowd. The tilt of a shoulder, a haircut, a perfume that drags me back by the collar, and my heart will do its old trick. My father's car, a Buick I will recognize even in my sleep, will appear in my rearview mirror, and I will change routes out of habit before I remember there's no need. Healing is a long road with a few unmarked turns, and I am patient now with my own detours. When people ask how it ended, I tell them it didn't, not in the fairy tale sense. There was no final curtain. There were documents and decisions and dinners, and a little girl who learned the words to boundaries before she could read. There were courts that said no when I was too tired to shout it. There was work and there was rest. There was love that shows up. And when people ask me if I forgave them, I say the only thing that has ever felt like a clean truth in my mouth. I stopped demanding that my freedom wait for my forgiveness. I chose my life first. Forgiveness, if it ever arrives, can find me at the table I set for myself. On a clear evening not long after the case settled, I walked past the old storage facility where I once slept. The metal doors were all down, the numbers spray-painted above them like a kind of count. I stood on the sidewalk and let the memory wash over me until it lost its power to knock me under. Then I pulled my coat tighter and kept walking home. At my door, I turned the key in a lock I installed, in a place I chose, in a life I built. Daniel and Rachel were already inside, arguing softly about the garlic bread, Lily's laughter bouncing off the walls like good gossip. I stood there for a second, just listening. The sound of ordinary joy, the one I had once thought was for other people, and then stepped in. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like owning the ground under my feet. They left me with a sentence. I answered with a story. And I am still writing it line by line on paper I paid for with a pen no one can take out of my hand. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stayed awake a little longer, sitting at the kitchen counter with a cup of tea gone lukewarm. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional settling creak of the building. I used to hate silence. It felt like a punishment, an empty room where my thoughts grew too loud. But now it felt like a privilege. I could breathe in it. I opened my laptop and pulled up the first spreadsheet I'd ever made. The one where I tracked every dollar I earned, every receipt, every bus ticket when I was 17 and living out of that storage unit. I'd kept it somehow through all the moves and all the years. Looking at it now, I realized it wasn't just a record of survival. It was proof of who I was even then. Not just a kid who had been abandoned, but a kid who kept going anyway. Melissa always told me, "You were your own first rescuer." I didn't fully believe her until now. I closed the spreadsheet, opened a new document, and started writing. Not a podcast script, not a legal statement. Just me, writing to myself at 17. "You are going to be okay. It's not going to feel like it, not for a long time. But you will build something out of this, something beautiful. You will find people who love you without conditions. You will learn how to love yourself. You will have bad nights, and you will survive those too. And one day, you'll sit at a kitchen counter in a home that belongs to you, with people sleeping safely in the rooms nearby, and you'll realize you made it. You figured it out." When I finished, I printed it and taped it inside my desk drawer, next to the original note that said, "You'll figure it out." My past and my present, side by side. One sentence meant to break me, one written to remind me I had survived anyway. The next morning, Lily padded into the kitchen in her pajamas and climbed onto my lap. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her curls sticking up in every direction. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that I'm really glad you're here." She smiled, satisfied with that answer, and asked if we could make pancakes. I said yes. As the batter sizzled on the pan and the apartment started to smell like vanilla, I realized this was what all of it had been for her. The courtrooms, the therapy sessions, the long nights staring at my phone, the tears, the rage. Not to erase the past. Not to rewrite it. But to make sure that today could exist exactly as it was. A warm kitchen. A safe home. A child who would grow up knowing she was never disposable. When the pancakes were done, Lily insisted on putting sprinkles on hers. For celebration, she said with authority. What are we celebrating? I asked. She thought for a second. Everything. And for the first time, I agreed completely.